We are living in the golden age of self-awareness. People can name their patterns, identify their attachment style, explain sometimes brilliantly exactly why they react the way they do in relationships. And intimacy still feels harder than it should. Not because they lack insight, but because insight hasn't changed how safe they feel in their body. And safety, real, felt, embodied safety, is where love actually lives. You can understand yourself deeply and still feel alone inside a relationship. You can say all the right things and still feel something in your body bracing the moment someone gets close. That gap is not about intelligence. It's about aliveness. And today we're going to talk about why knowing better hasn't changed how you love and what actually does. I'm Sarrah Rose, founder of the Tantric Activation Method, executive intimacy coach, and host of Love Activated. I've spent over 20 years working at the intersection of tantric philosophy, neurobiology, and modern coaching. I've been featured in Vogue, Men's Health, and Cosmopolitan, and I've worked privately with over 2,500 people, including many CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, on the one thing success doesn't automatically give you: the capacity to feel truly close to another person. I say that not to impress you, but because I want you to know this work is grounded. It's not theory. It's what I've watched change people's lives, and it's what changed mine. Which brings me to something personal. I spent years understanding myself very well. I had done the work. I knew my patterns. I could articulate my defenses with impressive clarity, still can. And for a long time, I mistook that clarity for growth. What I eventually realized was that I was using insight the same way a lot of my clients use it, not to go deeper, but to stay in control. If I could explain what I was feeling, I didn't have to fully surrender to it. If I could analyze a dynamic, I didn't have to risk being changed by it. Understanding had become my most sophisticated form of self-protection. And that's what this episode is about. Here's what nobody tells you about all the personal development work, the books. You can understand a pattern and keep living it. You can name your defenses and still act from them. You can explain exactly what's happening in your relationship in real time with clinical precision and still feel completely disconnected from the person sitting across from you. Because understanding something is not the same as healing it. The pattern doesn't live in your mind. It lives in your nervous system, your emotional memory. The mind can understand what's happening in the present while the body is still responding from the past. This is what therapists are increasingly noticing. People are learning the language of healing faster than they're experiencing the shift that it's meant to create. So they can name their triggers, identify their attachment patterns, trace every reaction back to its origin, and still nothing changes. Because insight can describe your pattern, but it can't release you from it. The key isn't more insight. What we actually need is integration. And those are two completely different things. I was sitting with a new client around 39 years old, very successful in finance, and she just ended a relationship that had looked right in every way. And she came to me because she wanted to understand why. The man was kind, he was consistent, he was available, he was everything she wanted. And she felt like a failure for walking away. She said, "I don't understand. After so many wrong ones, I finally found a good guy. So why do I feel nothing? I just want to feel alive in a relationship. I keep trying to show up, but there's nothing there." And she was so frustrated. And as she spoke, I watched her body. She had tight shoulders, shallow breath. She was just completely braced, not with sadness, but with frustration at herself. And then she said to me, I get that same frozen feeling I had when my high school boyfriend broke up with me. Like I just disconnect from everything inside of me. And she could explain it perfectly. She knew what was happening. And it kept happening anyway. And what I saw was that she wasn't disconnected from the relationship, but she was disconnected from herself. When closeness arrived, she left, not physically, but internally. And I call that leaving yourself. It's when the body checks out while the mind keeps performing presence. Insight can describe that pattern brilliantly, but it can't reach back into the body and reopen what closed. And here's the part most people don't want to admit, that insight can actually become a shield. If you can explain yourself, you don't have to fully surrender yourself. If you can analyze a dynamic, you don't have to risk being changed by it. If you can narrate your fear, you don't have to stay present long enough to actually feel it move. So you stay informed, but untouched. Observation replaces participation. Explanation replaces exposure, and the relationship stays safe, but not alive. When a relationship feels stable but flat, people often start stirring the waters without knowing why. Small irritations become bigger arguments. Minor misunderstandings become emotional standoffs. Sometimes that's dysfunction, but sometimes it's a nervous system starving for aliveness. Conflict becomes a substitute for intimacy because at least it feels like something, and the body would rather feel intensity than to feel nothing at all. There's a shadow side to all of this awareness that we don't talk about often enough, that insight can become a weapon. Therapy language, you're triggered, that's your attachment, I'm setting a boundary. Those things can be used to diagnose, dismiss, or dominate rather than to understand. Words meant to create closeness become tools for control. When insight is used to win instead of to connect, it stops being growth. It becomes distance dressed up as maturity. In a culture increasingly quick to label longing as pathology and intensity as avoidance, it has become easier to diagnose love than to risk experiencing it. Real intimacy is not built on being right, it's built on being reachable. I worked with a man in a senior leadership role, emotionally trained, articulate, genuinely committed to doing the work, but his wife kept telling him that he wasn't present. So in our sessions, he could name everything. If he pulled away, when she was upset, he traced it to the pain he felt as a child when his father upset his mother. When he lashed out, he could link it to feeling powerless growing up. He had done everything right, learned himself, could communicate his patterns clearly, and nothing was changing. He kept feeling disconnected, unsatisfied, emotionally distant from the person he loved most. And at one point I said to him, "You understand everything, but I don't feel you anywhere in this." He wasn't using insight to connect. He was using it to stay in control. And control are opposites of each other. He wasn't available. He was unreachable. There's a difference, and it's an important one. Most people who struggle with intimacy aren't obviously shut down or avoidant. They're self-aware, but they're not reachable. They can't be touched. They're just slightly outside of the moment, navigating it, just guarded, like enough to actually stay safe, just analytical enough to prevent actual contact. Intimacy doesn't require you to understand what's happening. It requires you to be in it while it's happening. I worked with a couple who were emotionally intelligent, highly self-aware, had strong communication, but there was no softness between them, no real contact. So I listened to them for a while, explaining themselves, and then I asked, "Can you actually feel each other right now?" And they both tensed. And she started to explain the situation, analyzed it quickly, precisely. And I asked again, not the situation, but can you feel yourself? And can you feel him? She resisted. And then finally he reached over and took her hand and I saw her soften. And with tears in her eyes, she said, "No, I don't usually feel anything." They weren't in the relationship, they were talking about it. So we stopped talking and we started feeling. So if insight isn't enough, what is? 3 things, simple but not easy. The first is felt safety, not conceptual safety, not knowing intellectually that someone is trustworthy. Felt safety registered in the body. Your nervous system has to feel safe enough to let connection in without looking for an out. When you notice yourself in your head, overanalyzing, or in your emotions, overwhelmed and reactive, or in an old pattern of control or withdrawal, those are signals that your body is looking for an exit. The practice is to come back into your body, back into what you're actually feeling, back into the moment you're in. So in Tantra, we work with what's called the central channel, the internal pathway that runs through the center of your body, from your pelvis to your heart to your head. It's where presence, energy, and awareness align. When you're connected there, everything settles. Your mind quiets, your body opens, you feel present, alive, like yourself. Most people lose connection to themselves first, and that's what prevents connection in a relationship. Love doesn't disappear because of the other person. It disappears because you left yourself. And the second is presence. Presence is not performing presence. It's not saying the right thing or handling the moment correctly. It's actually being there with your whole body, your uncertainty, all of it. The shift is from what should I say? How do I handle this to what am I feeling? And can I stay with it without immediately trying to fix it? Most people aren't in connection. They're managing the connection. And love cannot activate where you are not present. And the third is aliveness. People say they want to feel alive and then avoid everything it actually takes to feel that way. Because aliveness requires radical honesty, followed through, tends to shake things up. So ask yourself, what opens you up? What shuts you down? Where do you feel lit up? And where do you quietly disappear? And let the truth of those answers land, not as information to analyze, but as something to feel. Because aliveness grows where attention lives. Here's something to try today. In a moment of connection with someone you care about, or even alone right now, notice where you are in your body. Are you in your head narrating? Are you in your chest bracing? Are you slightly outside of the moment observing? Are you observing yourself from a distance? Wherever you are, just notice it without judgment. And take one slow breath down the center of your body, not in your core. That central channel running from your pelvis up through your heart and into your head. As you inhale, ask yourself one question. Am I here? Not, am I performing being here? Not, do I understand what's happening here? Simply, am I actually present in this moment, in this body, with this person? If the answer is no, and often it will be, that noticing is the practice. You don't have to force yourself back. Just the act of recognizing that you've left yourself is the beginning of returning. In Tantra, we call this pratyahara, the withdrawal of attention from the outside world back into the inner body. It's the foundation of all presence, and it's available to you in any moment. Do it once today, even for 10 seconds. That's enough. We're not stuck because we lack understanding. We're stuck because our systems are organized around protection, as intelligent and necessary as it once was, has limits. Because love requires more than stability. It requires vulnerability that is embodied, not performed. Presence that is felt, not narrated. Real change is rarely dramatic. It looks like staying present a few seconds longer when discomfort rises, like noticing the urge to withdraw and choosing not to act on it immediately. like feeling something fully without optimizing, fixing, or explaining it away. Those moments may not look impressive, but they are everything. They are when insight finally integrates. It's when protection begins to soften, when love starts being something you manage and starts being something that you actually inhabit. Knowing better is a beginning. Staying present when it matters is the practice. And when those two finally come together, something inside you exhales. And that exhale, that is what you've been looking for. If this landed, follow Love Activated so you don't miss the next episode. And if you want to go deeper to work on this in a real embodied way, you can find me at sarrahrose.com. Before you close this, try the practice just once. Ask yourself, am I here? Because the insights that actually change you are the ones you let yourself feel.